Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you the State of Mistweaver in Shadowlands Beta Part 2. It's been a little while since we've been having a chance to talk about Mistweaver alone, so I wanted to start having another video to kind of summarize some of my thoughts, talk about the Covenants, Legendary, Soulbinds, all that other good stuff, and where it all stands, alright? So, starting off, if you guys haven't subbed to YouTube already, please feel free to do so down at the bottom. Helps the channel out quite a bit. And now, Mistweaver, especially if you've been kind of on the fence as to whether or not you want to play it, and you've heard a lot of different conflicting reports about the state of the spec, and, you know, some people are saying it's terrible, some people are just kind of memeing on it. I really want to disperse a lot of those rumors because I've been playing Mistweaver a crazy amount on beta. I've had a ton of experience with it, and I've honestly been extremely impressed by what I've been seeing because of the circumstances that this spec is playing in, you know? You don't just look at how a spec plays in a vacuum without looking at, okay, well, how do they play in this specific raid with the kit they got, with the tools at their disposal, with, you know, the dungeons and the Mythic Plus and how things look compared to the affixes and all of that, all right? So I wanted to kind of disperse a lot of those rumors that Mistweaver's not going to be doing quite well. Mistweaver in a raid environment, as you're going to see some of our raid testing here, we had some recent testing for Kael'thas's and Sun King's Salvation encounter, and Mistweaver absolutely did a phenomenal job. And it has some obscene healing in this fight because you basically have one healer that you want to juice up that perfectly, you know, spam heals the Kael'thas NPC for you. Yes, that's very true, but that's the whole thing, is that Mistweaver synergizes very well for that and can allow groups to kind of get around this fight very quickly and very easily because the fight just ends once Kael'thas reaches 100% HP. Now, for a lot of the other encounters, going into it, there's a lot of bleeds, there's a lot of focused healing that's going to be required throughout. There's still going to be that predictable, you know, minute and a half level of damage that's going to be going on, but Mistweaver does an excellent job of dealing with a lot of the spot healing, and it still actually has some pretty powerful cooldowns at its disposal. Yeah, there's going to be, you know, Revival that's right there, but you also are going to have Invoke Yu'lon, which, though it was recently nerfed, is still a very powerful 3-minute cooldown because of how strong Enveloping Breath is. So whenever you summon your Celestial and you cast Enveloping Mist while the Celestial is up, it then casts an additional hot onto 6 players, which heals them for a pretty substantial amount and makes them all take 10% more healing from you. This is absolutely phenomenal, and it's kind of had people put together some very, very focused builds to do as much healing with just Yu'lon alone as they can. Yu'lon lasts for a very long time, so this will definitely be an area that you want to take advantage of your mana tea, and maybe you can start angling yourself more towards just feed me in this very narrow 3-minute window and I'll do a crazy amount of healing, possibly. But even if that doesn't perfectly pan out, it's still a very strong cooldown that they have to be able to work with, and it can offer itself some pretty substantial efficiency as well. A lot of the raids, like I said, are going to have these bleed effects, but they're also going to be shadow damage. They've changed a lot of the bleeds to go from actual physical attacks to shadow damage. That works out really well for Mistweaver because you've got Diffuse Magic, you still have Fortifying Brew, you got some really powerful defensives at your disposal so that you'll be taking less damage. And one of the biggest things with healers in a progression rating environment, especially at high levels, because as we all know, everybody kind of copies what the top end guilds do. Especially at a high end level, for healers to take less damage and naturally do so is a tremendous advantage. Because while some healers may not think that it actually matters, one of the biggest things that you can do, especially early on in expansion when resources are crazy scarce, is to take less damage. The less mana that you're spending and burning on yourself, the more that you're going to be able to have more mana to overwhelm specific bad mechanics, or to just, you know, have more free time to be able to deal damage to the boss and be able to take it down more easily. Healer damage, that's been one area that Mistweaver's been criticized with for quite a while, but I'd also remind people that we're not in an Eternal Palace anymore. Eternal Palace shocked the healer community and really pushed everybody into this fear of healers must be doing damage, and while healers should be adding damage whenever possible, it's not so much that it is the only factor determining the worth of a healer. In this raid specifically, there's a lot of pressure, like I said, on those dot targets, on the bleeds, but there's also a ton of pressure on the tanks. Tanks get absolutely slaughtered in a lot of our raid testing, and they're going to need a lot of support that Mistweaver can provide. There is going to be a lot more attrition encounters as well. We're not doing Orgazoa, where the raid is full stacks of bleeds and still full stacks of dots, and you need to push the boss before you just run out of mana and then reset all the dots and stuff. We're not in those fights anymore. We're in a lot of spread out, more elongated fights where you need to top off the priority targets and then you have some time to rest and kind of collect yourself. You have some more fights like Vectis where there's constant damage that you need to push to the next phase so the dot damage stops, right? You have a lot of those things at your disposal, and in general, healer damage would be valuable, but not so much that it's the only factor you need to consider. In a 5-man environment as well. We're not in Season 4 of BFA anymore, where you just have to blast the biggest pack possible and hope you survive, and the healer needs to pump as much damage as they can before the tank dies. We're not in that at all. We're actually in an environment where there's constant damage flowing out of the enemy mobs. There's a lot of like natural cleaves that happen. There's no more snap spots, by and large. And there's a lot of small damage dots that go out onto the party that you can't possibly kick all of them. Like there's targets that literally just spam dots onto your allies. So frequent dispels, overwhelming amounts of healing, and of course the seasonal affix in Prideful, which is just this big mob that ramps in damage that you need to kill. Those are really big areas where Mistweaver's toolkit absolutely crushes it, and that's where I think Mistweaver's going to be in an excellent spot for raids and for Mythic Plus, as I mentioned. Now, when it comes to Covenant abilities, I definitely have my complaints a lot of times when it comes to how that gameplay actually interacts. That's where I have quite a few issues, and also the flexibility between them from raids and M+, seems to be extremely polarizing between the different abilities. So starting us off, Weapons of Order is one in particular that has had an absolutely crazy rocky road for a lot of the testing. It started off doing a crazy amount of healing, absolutely insane. It was just the majority of the throughput that the Mistweavers had, and then it got absolutely destroyed, and the mana cost was increased, the healing was massively reduced, but then people were saying, oh, maybe the mastery benefit that it gives will be worthwhile because they're reworking GG, and then they started killing that too. So now they're trying to bring it back up from the ashes a little bit and make it more competitive, and this buff does make it pretty decent, especially considering many of the other options for Mistweaver aren't in a crazy strong position right now in terms of, compared to where Weapons of Order used to be. But the problem I find with it is that it doesn't really give you any sort of synergy for Mythic Plus. So you're just kind of having this Covenant ability that's like, yay, a little extra healing on a 2-minute cooldown. And that's about it. Nothing that I find too terribly interesting on that, unfortunately. Now, when it comes to Fallen Order for the Venthyr, this ability, just kind of like clones in general, have had a lot of bugs and a lot of issues throughout beta testing, but it does look to be some of the strongest, in part because of how strong those bugs are for the spec. So you have a 24-second portal that you open up, and every 2 seconds you summon a new spirit. So you have Ox, Crane, and Tiger. So Ox and Tiger, for example, are going to deal some damage for you, whereas the Crane will start healing. So you start spewing out a bunch of these different clones that are going to start helping you in various ways, and as a cooldown, it's extremely strong for dealing with high levels of Prideful. It's great for dealing with boss fights. It's just a massive 3-minute cooldown. You can slam down into the raid and just let them do the work for a very low mana cost. For what it does, it's extremely good, but that's also heavily influenced by the bugs that are still existing with some of this tech. For example, the clones are supposed to be lasting only 6 seconds. Instead, they're lasting 4, allowing some extra casts to go off and extra value to be given from that. But also, one thing I didn't know about that Abolito from the Peak of Serenity Discord had brought to my attention and told me about was that they actually are having the enveloping mists that the clones are casting are self-buffing. So while usually enveloping mist is supposed to buff your other heal effects, it's just buffing its own effect and doing even more throughput as a result. Which, hey, is great for beta testing and M+ testing, so you can completely shut down high Prideful or anything like that, or difficult pulls, but it doesn't give you a perfect idea as to how it's actually supposed to be performing. So when it comes to some of these other Covenant abilities, like I mentioned with Weapons of Order being just not that great, but it was on the rise, it starts becoming a bit closer of an idea that once this actually is fixed, things are going to start moving a little bit closer together. But I do think Fallen Order, regardless, is going to be kind of on the chopping block, and it's kind of one to watch for that could likely be nerfed in the future. Bone Dust Brew got its Vivify Cleave fixed previously. If you just cast Bone Dust Brew on a group, and you cast a Vivify on anybody, every single person that had Bone Dust Brew on them would be cleave healed through Vivify. It no longer works that way, confirming everybody's suspicion that it was a bug. Surprisingly, Blizzard literally just said nothing about it, and they just hotfixed it and didn't even reference it. But Bonus brew getting better is really just a matter of like tuning. Again, I don't think the interaction with this is super good. It's, you know, a fire and forget ability similar to the Venthyr, but I guess a lot of the Covenant abilities have been ending up that way, unfortunately. Phaline Stomp, they've actually clarified the target caps for these abilities. Previously it hit like 20 enemies or something like that, so now it only hits 5, and now it heals 5 allies, not only with an Essence Font bolts, but also heals them for just natural spell power and everything like that. 5-man environment, this is really not strong enough to carry you through Prideful or to carry you through like boss fights. It's basically just like a win more ability where if you're already easily able to deal with the content, yeah, you can deal some more damage, you can do a little bit of healing that prevents you from having to stop damage. Cool, but not really what I would say is super strong. In a raid environment, it's, again, kind of like a win more. If you're able to stand still in the Phaline, if you're able to, you know, constantly be hitting all the targets that you need to, if there's nothing on the ground that you're not going to have to worry about seeing or struggle seeing because you popped like 4 Phalines all over melee, obfuscating your view, you know, it's like a lot of if scenarios that don't really work out in reality. So when it comes to a lot of the Covenant abilities, yeah, you're going to have some high performers, but I wouldn't really say any of them like get me amazingly riled up. I'm like, I can't wait to just hit a button every 3 minutes and then spawn monks to do the job for me. Woo! You know, it's just, it is. It is what it is. When it comes to Celestials, I talked about this previously. You've got Invoke Yu'lon, which is a baseline ability. But you can also replace Yu'lon with the talent, which is Invoke Chi-Ji, the Red Crane, our good old Crackbird. So Crackbird isn't really too much on crack anymore. It is meant to be kind of like a fusion between Way of the Crane and, you know, your regular Invoke Red Crane and kind of just mash them together. And it's kind of a failure in that regard. Basically, your damage abilities are supposed to kick up Gusts of Mists, but they've nerfed it so substantially that you barely feel any sort of big impact, and you pretty much are just using the Red Crane because it's kind of one of the only good options in a 5-man environment in the talent row, and it gives you some cheap Enveloping Mists that you can then extend with Rising Mists. It's okay. A lot of times I've just been using it for, you know, high levels of Prideful if I didn't have the Venthyr, or using it with the Venthyr so I could just kind of overwhelm the amount of damage that they're having, or that we're putting out. So it's been okay, but it's really just like the Enveloping Breath that kind of carries Yu'lon, that kind of carries Chi-Ji, and I think it could be so much more. I mean, it'd really be nice to start seeing lower cooldowns on these abilities, higher uptime on them, but obviously some sort of commensurate nerf. So that it kind of feels like you're the healing monk that's fighting on the side of the Celestials. You've got that partner, you've kind of got like a healer pet class at your side to be able to help improve and augment and change around some of your healing a little bit. Because I think for too long, Mistweaver's had just kind of limited gameplay interactions, and I think it's sort of stagnant in that regard as well. Yeah, you're getting some cool CDs to be able to play with, you're going to be having some very strong resources at your disposal, but it's not something that's constant and always with you. It's like, all right, every 3 minutes, here we go, like, now I get to pound it. But otherwise, it's not too terribly overwhelming. Jade Serpent Statue has only like a 7-second channel duration now, which is a pain to keep up in a 5-man environment, and it's probably even worse to keep up in a raid environment as well. So pretty much you just run Refreshing Jade Wind in raids, and a lot of times the other talents haven't really changed too terribly much. You know, you're still running an Upwelling primary build in raids, although some people have been trying to play around with like a Rising Mist, spam all the envelopes that you can type of setup. I've seen that a little bit. It's kind of odd, but hey, I like the experimentation. But I would say by and large, Mistweaver has kept a lot of the same gameplay elements. So if you're learning it now or you're learning it in pre-patch, it's going to be very similar to when you actually end up playing it in Shadowlands. Now, that being said, the legendaries do offer some nice bit of gameplay interaction. The most notable of them are 2 in particular. Ancient Teachings of the Monastery is definitely my favorite legendary, but just because it's my favorite doesn't mean it's really the best. Your Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, and Rising Sun Kick heal an injured ally within 20 yards for 120% of the damage done. I love this legendary. It's dope. I love being able to heal and deal damage and everything. I mean, you know, playing Disc Priest all the time as well. So, unfortunately, this doesn't quite carry you enough when you get into high-level dungeon content. It's great for like the 10 to 12s, which I would say is like the moderate level keystones in beta right now. You go in with some people who have good familiarity with the dungeons and the pulls, and they have the right trinkets on and everything like that, and yeah, you could just DPS your way to victory. But when you start going into higher level prideful or even higher level tyrannical really hurts on beta right now. Ancient Teachings is just not enough to get you through those dangerous situations. And once again, it's kind of like what I said with the Phaeline Stomp. It's just a win more legendary. If you already are not stressed, it'll just make that even less impactful as well. It'll just be very easy to be able to heal, you know, these low-level keystones because you've already got a handle on it and everybody already knows what they're doing and all that stuff. To actually kind of carry you through the heavy healing, though, the primary legendary and probably the ideal legendary, if nothing else changes, is Tear of Morning. I don't know why it's not Tear of the Morning, but who am I writing tooltips? Renewing Mist increases your healing done to the target by 15% for 12 seconds, so it applies that extend life buff that you're familiar with from back in WoD. 25% of your healing of your enveloping mist and Vivify healing is also applied to all targets with Tear of Morning. So it's quite a nice resource that you're able to have. It actually got nerfed pretty recently, but that doesn't really change the fact that it's a super powerful legendary, and it's extraordinarily flexible for both raids and Mythic Plus. It also has a neat little snapshot ability where you can cast on like a low health target. Let's say you have, you know, three renewing mists out and you just got another charge of renewing mist back. If you cast on that injured ally that doesn't have extend life on them and then you immediately cast the renewing mist, it'll heal them with the vivifies from everybody that you hit, and then it actually kind of spell queue counts it to heal that target. It's kind of cool. Similar interaction with what we saw from like Beacon of Virtue. So you actually have some pretty awesome potential for just pounding extra healing into your targets and getting huge value out of it. It's flexible enough for 5-mans and for raids to the point that you probably want to just make this one first and even kind of wait to make your legendary until you unlock this one. Because keep in mind, you can make one level 1 legendary a week. It's 100 Soul Ash. And it takes, you know, an extra 100 Soul Ash to bring it from level 1 to level 2, level 3, level 4. It's always, every level is 100 Soul Ash. So it might just turn out, if you are, you know, in more serious rating and everything like that, you might just want to wait to kill Sludge Fist on normal or heroic without a legendary. And then after that, you make a level 3 Tear of Morning legendary to get you ready for the end of heroic week and into mythic week as well. Seems like that could be a really strong play rather than making a suboptimal legendary and having a lower ranked Tear of Morning as you end up getting into mythic. But everybody's going to be a little bit different onto that, so we'll have more information on legendaries and everything like that as we get quite a bit closer. Otherwise, if you guys got any sort of questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Lots of changes still going to be happening on beta, so be sure to tune into my live stream as well. Guys, every Wednesday we're going to be covering all the latest changes that are happening to all the healers, talking about them, discussing them, and sharing a lot of my thoughts as well. Also, links to the Discord in the description if you got any sort of questions as well. Comment section works great. Discord's an easy way to get in touch as well. Thank you for joining, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll catch y'all next time.